Danielle mentioned, so we're going to go through some of the collaborative funding models and in particular focus on the innovation vouchers today. And I'll go through the process and sort of how it works and how you can make use of these. And then Andrew will talk about sort of the benefits and why these are handy. So first off, for those of you who may not be familiar, who or what is Hothouse? So we are the knowledge transfer office for TU Dublin, and we are Ireland's top performing knowledge transfer office. And we also work to commercialize the intellectual property that comes from our own research, as well as support entrepreneurship and startups. So here's who we actually are, our faces. So we have Paul McGuire is the head of innovation and enterprise. Andrew, Kieran, and David are licensing executives. Danielle, who you just met, is our marketing manager. And there's me, I'm the business development manager. We have Anne-Marie, who takes care of everything we need to run on a daily basis, and Bernadette runs the incubation center in the Greenway Hub. So for those of you who may or may not be aware, TU Dublin is part of a larger innovation consortium called the Dublin Region Innovation Consortium. So that consists of ourselves, Talent and Blanchardstown, DIAS, NCI, and IADT. So this is a consortium funded through Enterprise Ireland with the goal of increasing the innovation and sort of research impact in the Dublin region. It's also handy, so if you need to collaborate with some other people in these groups, the consortium makes that much easier. And they do run their own events and workshops, which you're happy to pop into if those are of interest to you. And just to show some of the output of Hothouse over the years, so on the sort of entrepreneurship side, we've helped our clients get over 200 million euro of equity investments and helped to create hundreds of sustainable businesses and jobs in Ireland. More on the research side, we have helped our researchers with over 150 license agreements, 41 spinouts from our research groups, as well as assisted with over 100 patents and invention development. And so just a bit more detail about the services that we offer. So we do work in these 4 main areas. So we do engage quite a bit with industry, trying to get them to collaborate with academia and helping with the funding and sort of spin-out companies. We engage again with our researchers to help commercialize their research, protect the IP, and sort of facilitate the interactions and funding with industry. We also have student support and entrepreneurship, and we also have entrepreneurial training and offer incubator space. So focusing on the industry and research part of this, so if a company is interested to engage with a third level or you're interested to engage with industry, the first thing we'd usually recommend is to look at the innovation voucher scheme with Enterprise Ireland. So this is €5,000 the company applies for, and it's just in exchange for sort of research expertise at a third level that they don't have access to within their own company. And these are to, develop some sort of new innovative process or product within the company. So it does have to be something innovative. The company can't just use it for like routine testing or web development. There has to be something research based and something innovative with it. There is the parallel program in the north run through Invest NI. And both of these vouchers you can use across the island. So if there's a company that you want to work with in the north, that's no problem, and same with the vice versa. So anyone can make use of this program. Brief mention of the Fusion program. It's run through Intertrade Ireland, and it's another common collaborative funding model that we use with industry. So this lets a company partner with a third level and actually hire a graduate to work in their company on their own project for 12 to 18 months, and it covers their salary for that. So again, today the focus is really on the innovation vouchers and how they work. So again, it's €5,000. It's not a lot. They're small projects, and they're really meant as an initial stepping stone to kind of like just introduce research and industry together, especially for companies that maybe are not familiar and working with the third level. They're kind of low risk to both sides. It's not a lot of money or time. And it's really meant to build that relationship so that you can scale up into larger funding models, such as innovation partnerships or possibly the Fusion program I just mentioned. So the $5,000 is mainly used to cover the salary of the person working on the project, but you can use up to 30% of it to get equipment that's relevant for the project as well. So these usually work in one of two ways. So either the company will first have an innovation voucher, and then they would come to Hothouse to look for help to find a research group to work with. Or the company might come to us first, or they might already know a research group and they would like to work on a project together. So the company will apply to EI for the voucher. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks to process the application. And once the company has a voucher and a research group has agreed to take it on, we'll sit down and have a short meeting and put together a project plan with a clear timeline and deliverables that everybody agrees on. We sign a collaborative research agreement, and we can get going on the project. I would really encourage you to talk to us as early as possible in this process, even if you're just starting to think about it, because really the sooner you talk to us, the more we can help you and take care of kind of the background work so that you can just focus on the actual research. So one of the most common questions that industry and researchers ask about the vouchers is, how much time is actually involved in €5,000 of work. And so we usually say 50 to maximum 100 hours of time, just depending on the salary of who is working on it. So, about a month of a postdoc would be a pretty common time frame for a voucher. And that could be all at once, or it might be spread out over several months, just depending on the project. The vouchers do work better if you have a dedicated resource to put towards your project. So you can have a research assistant, a graduate student, postdoc, or you can recruit an undergraduate student for a short time to work on the project if you want. So the typical deliverables, again, they're small projects, so things like literature reviews, reports, technical roadmaps. In some cases, maybe an initial prototype of a device or demonstrators are all very common deliverables for these. And the project length varies quite a bit. Again, if it's a literature review, it might only take a month to get done. Whereas if there's some longer term sampling involved, it might be a couple of hours a week over several months. So, on average, about 3 months is a normal time frame, but they can vary within that. So just some more specific examples from some of the different research groups. So the Food Innovation Lab, they tend to do a lot of recipe development or new flavor development with food companies, shelf life analysis, helping to advise on equipment for maybe make a new food process. They have a voucher right now with a vegan burger company that's looking to improve the texture of their burgers, and they want advice on some new binding agents that they could use. CBREW is the Sustainable Infrastructure and Buildings Research Group. They do lots of vouchers and projects on building materials selection. So for example, there's one with a concrete company that's interested in looking at different aggregates to add to their concrete mix. So we have a voucher for that. There's another one with a company making some in-floor heating, and they'd like advice on specific materials that can maximize heat transfer. So those would be common vouchers that they would do. In the Create Lab, they do a lot of CAD drawings and actually designing like an initial prototype of a device if a company is making a new physical product. The ARV Lab recently completed a voucher with an educational company that wanted sort of a how to use VR in a classroom setting training guide, so they put that together. And CREST, excuse me, tends to do a lot of corrosion analysis, or if a company's developed a new type of surface coating, they can do some testing with that. So a very specific example. So Susan McKeever in CEDAR did an innovation voucher with Docosoft. They're a software company that works to make workflow and document management software for the insurance industry. It was a 3-month project. The deliverables you can see there were quite short. they wanted a report with sort of a ranking of their own demonstrators, and then they wanted to shortlist those demonstrators with the steps the company could then take to progress each one of them. So it was a 3-month project. It was very successful with both sides. Everybody was very happy. And it did end up progressing into an EI Career Development Fellowship. And Susan got a fully funded postdoc from this. So, what might look like a small voucher that might, not seem like it's worth it. It's not a lot, but they do scale up into like much, more significant projects. And I know Andrew's going to talk more about that, so I'll let him do that. And again, just if you have any questions, please get in touch with us. The earlier the better, and we can really help you out and kind of help you navigate this and take care of a lot of the background work. So with that, that's my part. So we can hand over to Andrew, and he'll talk more about some of these scaling up projects and the benefits of the collaborations.
Thank you very much, Shawna. Very interesting. We appreciate the example for the different types of research and research centres and groups are available. And if Andrew is ready, we'll open up for the next stage of what research might look like for staff, students, and potential collaboration with industry. So, Andrew, you're on mute and your screen is hidden as well, please, if you wouldn't mind changing back over.
Now, can you see my slides?
We can. Thank you very much. And thanks, Shawna, again.
Thanks, Shawna. Yeah, so I think Shawna's talked us through some specifics there of the innovation vouchers, the types of projects, how they're a very, very good starting project, and how they can develop into bigger projects. I'm going to talk a little bit about, overall strategy of developing out your research with industry and the benefits that you will get from this. Before I start that, though, there was a specific request from some participants just to talk a little bit about IP and the TU Dublin IP policy. So it's a little off topic, but I'm just going to do a couple of slides on this before I move on. It is related to industry collaboration because when industry collaborate with us, they are particularly interested in intellectual property and who's going to own the intellectual property, how it's going to be managed, and so on. So TU Dublin, in common with the other universities, have in place a IP policy. It's in line with sort of national frameworks for how intellectual property is dealt with. And there's a new TU Dublin-wide intellectual property policy that is effective as of, I think, the middle of the summer. I won't go into the details there, but just what it addresses is our processes and policies around intellectual property. So how it's identified, assessed, protected, managed, and commercialized for the benefit of the university, for the benefit of the inventors, for the benefit of all the stakeholders like the funding agencies and the taxpayers. And this IP policy is applicable to all TU Dublin colleagues and students. We will be running a seminar next month. I'll give you details at the end, which will be all about intellectual property, but intellectual property in general and intellectual property in TU Dublin. So if you are interested, please see the details at the end. I'll see you all in November to discuss that. Just before, again, I get into the benefits of working with industry, I suppose there's a bit of hygiene here. When you are working with industry, it's not the same as when you're working with another university. When you're working with another university, everybody's primary motivation is to do really good research and get really good publications. So it's get everything you're doing out there, publicized as widely as possible and as quickly as possible. And that can be possible with industry collaborations, but your industry collaborators may have very different concerns. They're going to be far more interested in the commercial aspect of things. So just two things that you will see as researchers are confidentiality agreements and material transfer agreements. All the processes around the management of intellectual property are run by Hothouse, by the link in Blanchardstown, by industry liaison out in Tala. But researchers are at the forefront and are sometimes given these documents and asked to sign them. So a confidential disclosure agreement is what you would expect. So it's an agreement between ourselves and a company that information exchange will be held confidentially. This allows us to put in place project plans, and to develop out a relationship with the company. You should never sign this. You should always ask us in Hothouse, if you're in City Campus, to sign it, or the appropriate people in Tal or Blanchardstown. And the reason that you don't want to sign this personally is you want this to be a relationship between the university and the company. So if something goes wrong, you're covered by the university's professional indemnity insurance, and you're not going to be personally sued in the unlikely event that something goes wrong. Similarly with material transfer agreements, when we're taking materials like, for example, the CREST projects that Shawna discussed, companies have to send us samples and materials, and we have very simple agreements in place to deal with those situations. Who's responsible for the materials, what happens if something goes wrong, and so on. And so all this again will be discussed in much more detail in November. Okay, so why work with industry? So I did a talk in June about a sort of a framework for thinking about external engagements. So this was to think a little bit about, why you want to engage with industry and who you're going to engage with and how you're going to engage with them. In this talk, I'm going to get a little bit more in depth about one aspect of the why work with industry. And we know why academics work with industry, and the reasons are as varied as the number of academics. So people have very, very different reasons. Some people are only interested in research funding, and some are only interested in doing it because they want to create impact for society. Most people, there's elements of all these in their motivations. But in my experience, probably one of the biggest motivators is the opportunity to get research funding for PhDs and postdocs. And the collaboration with industry, as we've seen, Shawna has discussed with the vouchers, can free up a lot of funding for PhDs and postdocs. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how it's not just the actual funding from the industry collaboration, but how those interactions with industry collaborations can free up other types of funding. A huge proportion of the Irish research funding goes into national research centres. There are a number of different types of research centres. The two main agencies that fund these research centres are Enterprise Ireland and Science Foundation Ireland. Enterprise Ireland fund technology centres and gateways. And these are really, really industry focused. And TU Dublin is involved in a number of these. So we have CEDAR, which is a technology centre that's there to help industry with data analytics and machine learning. We have the CREST Gateway, which is there to help Irish manufacturing industry with things like research into surface coatings. In Tala, there's Micro, which does biodiagnostics, which is another gateway. We're involved in the Meat Technology Centre, which has big buy-in from the Irish beef industry, as you'd expect. And recently funded is the collaboratory in the link in Blanchardstown, which is which is just getting up and running. It's going to deal a lot with cybersecurity. So Enterprise Ireland put a lot of their own core funding into these different centres and gateways. And that funding pays for project managers and pays for postdocs and researchers. And the reason that they do this is because these researchers in these centres are good at interacting with industry and delivering on projects with industry. And that is the Enterprise Ireland's main motivation. Enterprise Ireland are their remit is to help Irish industry, Indigenous Irish industry. Their remit is not to help Irish universities or anything like that. So they are really, really motivated by how well the researchers can help industry. And if you can help industry, that will free up core funding from Enterprise Ireland. Science Foundation Ireland have increasingly moved into this space of giving funding to researchers who can have good collaborations with industry. And they really ramped this up with this SFI Centres programs. They started about 7 years ago, I think. And since the start of that program, in over 7 years, there's been €1 billion of research funding put into these centres. So this is, this is where the focus is of the research funding. We're involved in 3, I think, which is ADAPT, which is led by Trinity, but has about 11 universities as part of it. And they look at a lot of machine learning, content, a lot of digital science. We've recently become members of MARI, which is the Maritime and Renewable Energy Institute. Our strand is being led by Professor Brian Norton, who's the lead on the, I think it's building energy. And within Connect then, which is sort of the Internet of Things and Communication Centre, we have Max and Mann, who's the lead there on the antenna research. And all these centres, the Enterprise Ireland centres are more industry focused, but the SFI centres have a target. You can see there on my pie chart, not a very exciting pie chart, it's just 1-1-1. 1/3 of their funding is expected to come from industry. 1/3 will be provided by the state through Enterprise Ireland or SFI. And 1/3 will come from non-exchequer, non-commercial sources, which is primarily going to be Horizon for the European Union. And these centres really have to hit these targets. So, you know, it's in these centres, literally the industry, every euro industry funding that you bring in can free up a euro in state funding. So the sort of the game is up. If you want to bring in substantial funding, you kind of have to really get industry collaborators on board. It's very, very difficult now to do this without industry collaborators. Okay, so this is the sort of the national research centres. But for those of you who are not involved in national research centres, or particularly for those of you who are working in areas that are not aligned to the national research centres. I mean, one of the main criticisms has been that, that these are all aligned to the national research priority areas. So if you're not in those areas, you may struggle to get funding. But there are other funding schemes that will involve or do require you to have industry partners. For example, H2020, which is now going to become Horizon Europe. So many of the bigger funding schemes in that, the innovation actions and so on, do require impact pathways. They will require impact pathways that have industry collaborators. The Department of Business Enterprise Innovation seems to be betting very heavily on the Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund, where if you build a consortium of maybe 3 or 4 other universities and companies, there are projects in that are being funded well into the millions. So they're quite large 2- and 3-year projects being funded through that, and we've been successful in being involved in a number of these. And then there are, for example, the EI Innovation Partnership, which are 12, 18-month one-on-one projects with industry partners. And those partners can be small companies, large companies, or whoever. Okay, and I just want to finish just by talking about, I suppose, 3 of the centres that are in TU Dublin. 2 of them nationally funded, 1 of them not. And how they do this, and how they do this very well. I'm conscious of the fact there's probably researchers from these centres, so I hope I represent them well. So CEDAR, who we discussed already, and the project that Shawna talked about with Susan McKeever was a CEDAR project. So the CEDAR is a EI funded technology centre, and it's a collaboration between UCD and TU Dublin. It's just been refunded for 5 years, and EI are promising €12 million of funding. Under the 1/3 model, they will then look for 12 million from industry funding and 12 million from H2020, which means over the 5 years that'll be €36 million. So it's a substantial undertaking and good sized centre, and it allows them to hire quite a number of postdoc and research assistants and PhDs. And being part of the centre, it says a network of over 50 companies. I couldn't find the number, and I looked at their webpage and they had all these logos. There's definitely 50 there, but I think they might have close to 100 companies at this point. And they kind of balance the projects that they do with industry very, very well. Because some of the projects, to be honest, are of more interest to the researchers. Some of the projects are of more interest to the companies involved. And you don't want to find yourself just doing projects that you don't find interesting. I mean, you have to be motivated to do what you're doing. So they do a really good job of balancing these out. So they do quite a number of these short-term projects that Shawna discussed, which is the innovation vouchers. And they'll have postdoctoral researchers or research assistants who can work for a short time on these projects, a number of them simultaneously often. And then in the medium term, they'll do innovation partnerships, and they've done some really, really interesting work with business intelligence companies. They've done some really interesting projects in machine vision for agriculture. I mean, they've done quite a variety of these innovation partnerships by, working with Hothouse, and they've managed to find really interesting partners to work with. And then, as Shawna mentioned, these can lead on to much longer term projects. So this Marie Curie Career Fit program, and it'll pay for a postdoc. I think they have to come from outside the European Union, and the caliber of postdocs that they've been able to bring in. We've had a number of these Marie Curie Career Fits has been really, really high, and they're coming in for like 2 or 3 year projects with industry partners. And there's real deep research in what they're doing in these. So again, so see that they've really you can see the progression as they've gone from innovation vouchers to these long-term 3 year projects with industry partners. And then Cibru, who were mentioned again by Shawna, so they are sort of a relatively new and just TU Dublin based centre. They don't have the state funding at the moment like let's say CEDAR or CREST do, but I think they have some funding in place. And what they work on is delivering sustainable research for the Irish construction industry. And what they've been doing a really, really good job of, if I may speak frankly, they've done a really, really good job of building up their industry collaborations. I mean, they've done and delivered on quite a few of these innovation voucher projects. They're now working on an innovation partnership with the Irish Concrete Federation. And they have they're putting in quite a number of H2020 applications. They're doing collaborations with longer term collaborations with SFI and NSF. So they kind of have that flavor of mixing the short term projects, the medium term projects, and the longer term projects to build up capacity and leveraging their industry connections to help them bring in funding to do it very, very well. And the last centre I'll just mention is CREST. So CREST is, I guess, it's an EI technology gateway, and it's also a research centre in its own right. So part of it is a technology gateway, and what a technology gateway is, these are funded by Enterprise Ireland with to provide services and research for Irish industry in a particular area. And their area is in manufacturing, and particularly in surfaces and surface coatings. They've had a lot of benefits from having the gateway. For example, they've been very successful. EI had a capital equipment fund call there recently, and CREST were quite successful in bringing in grants for quite a substantial amount of new equipment. And again, they're balancing their projects. So because they're a gateway, they're expected to do really short-term, very, very commercial consultancy type project. They'll do a 1, 2, 3 week project with a company fully paid on a particular analysis of a surface or something. But they also do innovation vouchers, and they've built up really like a sequence of very strong innovation partnerships with a number of different companies. They did the SFITDAs. I know the SFITDAs are gone now, but they did a number of these as well, which were 1 year projects. And then the longer term, they've been recently awarded some of these Marie Curie Career Fits, and they're involved in a number of Horizon 2020 projects. And again, all these projects will require industry partners. Some of them are pure service, where you're just doing what the industry partner wants you to do in terms of the consultancy. And then some of them are really, truly, blue skies collaborative research when you look at the H2020s and the career fits. Okay, so I'm just going to finish up by mention the next 2 webinars that we're going to do. We're going to do 2 in November, at least. So the one on the 11th of November is on the commercialisation fund, and Tom Melia from Enterprise Ireland is going to come in and talk to us. And we're going to have case studies from a couple of TU Dublin researchers who are currently involved in COM funds or have recently finished one. The COM fund is should be of interest to you if you are thinking of developing out a technology that could form the basis of a new company. This is what Enterprise Ireland are interested in the COM fund. So it's not really about industry collaboration like we're discussing here, and it's not really about bringing in research funding. It's about getting money to build out a prototype that you think could be the next big thing, and that, you know, that's what EI are going to look for in your application. They're going to see, have you really got an interest to start a company? So if you're interested in hearing more about it, it's an excellent program if you think you have an idea that could form the basis of a company. And then the next webinar is on a broad introduction to IP. So there's been requests about this from a number of people, including students. So this will be open to anyone in TU Dublin. I'm going to talk briefly about our IP policy, and then a bit in general about IP and why it's important. Kind of not necessarily related to TU Dublin or research, but kind of a general talk on IP. And then how do you go about, to make it more practical, how do you identify IP in your work and make sure that you're doing the right thing in protecting it? Okay, so I think that is all I have, and I think I'm probably just running out of time. I'm going to drop my slides now, and I think Danielle, if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for presenting on the different areas and giving an overview for the researchers. So